Today, we will be featuring an incredibly special guest, Chia Amisola. Each time that I've had the privilege of seeing Chia perform, I'm met with the uncomparable warmth of like sneaking into a computer room late at night and like discovering myself within my comfort of pseudonyms and fan fictions and low count YouTube videos. As the carefully placed artifacts of Chia's ambient poetics fill a screen, I think the modern tendency to like doom scroll regresses back into something a bit more special and spiritual. Chia summons an alternative algorithm for a version of technology that acknowledges its body and physicality, which I think is really important to think about in 2026. Chia is as multifaceted as their artistic works, working as a product designer at Figma, but also serving as executive director at Develop, a Philippines-based research and creative organization that does incredible work around archiving, commissioning, presenting artistic works, and providing resources in the form of hundreds of talks and workshops. So very excited for Chia to be here today, and I'll hand it off now so they can share more about their own work. Thanks for being here.
For the intro. I do hope that everyone feels like they're sneaking around in the family computer again. Mm, I'll start sharing my screen. Let me know if any audio or visual thing. I'll be performing slash talking about some of my work. Um, I have a little website kind of like presentation prepared, and I'm gonna be launching a bunch of sites from it. All of my work can be experienced in the browser. They're generally in the form of sites, hypertext, games. I'll be reading it, interweaving the text and images you see on screen with like some external commentary and descriptions, thinking, speaking a bit about how I think this recent work fits into my practice. I'll be going through a bunch of work non-chronologically. I may flip back and forth between windows and pieces and different works, and you'll see why I do that in a bit. I've continuously made websites to make myself. Most of the work you'll see was made in the past 3 or so years. Maybe in contrast to the previous guest. So think of this as 3 years on the browser. I was born in 2000, and I've been coding since I was 8 years old, mostly making simple fan sites, making Flash games with ActionScript, playing with Visual Basic, modding games. Unrestricted access to the computer is dangerous, perhaps because it can be liberating. What I enjoyed most about this time was how all my work was kind of derivative in a way, making sites about things I loved that slowly made me. I liked how all the fan sites and shrines I'd make and enjoy ended up exceeding the whole of the thing I was making about. In a way, site making has always been a form of self preservation for me. It was always difficult for me to have something of my own growing up, materially or identity wise, so I began accumulating myself on the computer, where I felt I had most control. Almost every year since I was 8, I've had some personal website of some form. Sometimes it was dedicated to work, to other things I love, to resources, to collections. I probably have a few dozen personal sites today. This one, Chia Design, is kind of a large index of things I've been making online, tracing back to 2008 or 9. When I'm online, I give myself a domain. I give myself a place and a name. This situates the work, makes it legible, gives it form, makes it visible. There's a space where I exist. To some, this act also legitimizes it and the self. So this is me, again, talking to myself about the many domains I inhabit and the many works that make me. How to move each other. I suppose this is always what happens in practice. Every look away is to look again. Every moment apart is to come again. I created the ground we walked on and created every roof that I made until it could be considered shelter. What was unseen, I created what we all became. This piece is We Are Only Moving Towards Each Other. It was one of my earliest works that I'll be showing, made in 2023. I describe it as this concrete poem in the browser. It follows 50 pairs of web pages, tracing two windows named Me and You. Often I feel that websites are filmic in nature. Of course, they're all kind of an expanded cinema. I'm bringing you to look. We named everything that was not named. Nothing born would think repetition was a sin. To attend, they think a site has aliveness unlike any other, for it was always there. It took worship, it took the end. Working with this site kind of helped me define the type of work I wanted to make for the next few years. I'm working within the constraints of the browser, playing with text, image, and interactivity, and reading and authoring in a way that I don't think you can really do in any other medium. I woke up from a violently tender dream. I saw myself off at the station. This work, like many you'll see coming through, are quite textually dense. The lines that you see on screen and tucked within the titles, the address bars within my hovers and gestures, are usually over tens of thousands of lines long and are further complicated by how they can be reassembled, rearranged, read out of order. I like to write in the code editor, let data structures affect my language. When I write, I'm thinking about how my words will be executed and reassembled by both machine and audience gestures. As I read, you'll notice that I try to draw attention to the normally hidden or underutilized mechanisms of the browser. There's marginalia, the source code, what essentially anything that requires additional friction to access. Only when I let my cursor linger do these certain words appear. I think about the atmosphere around the work and its constraints, how it informs the text. I want to condition you inside the browser. I want to organize and disrupt your attention. That's all reading and form really does. I wondered why we were here, the world moving through me when I was still. Only I declare what I've lost. What comes out of the work As you go through it, as you open and close windows and manage your machine, is your own configurations of image and text left on the desktop, creating these kind of collages and worlds in you. Why is this simple thing so impossible? I watched everything, I let go, come back to myself. I guess these are hypertexts in form. Maybe I'm drawn to them because of the type of pluralities it allows, as it allows the work to live again, to turn any reader into an author. A flower is not a flower. It is made up of only non-flower elements: sunshine, clouds, time, space. Earth, minerals, gardeners, and so on. A true flower contains the whole universe. If we return any one of these non-flower elements to its source, there will be no flower. I want work that rejects a canon, that rejects a sense of truth or a single sense of self, goes against authority. Perhaps it's only in this fragmentation and in these partialities that I can approximate a whole, become larger. When I read and make work, I want to leave room for emergence, for the world to be extended beyond me. This is what making on the internet is about, anyway. I feel that every website I make, whether abandoned, whether only occupied for a moment, or aspiring to be an endless compendium of self, will all be designed to be intertwined with one another. Whether it's the net art I make, personal indexes, they're all archives in some form. Every time I perform these sites, especially when I perform multiple of them, I like how I re-encounter myself. Notice combinations of words that maybe I hadn't thought about before. A lot of these days I'm thinking about how we're only really at the beginning of what authorship looks like on the internet. I'm excited to continue pushing on new forms of narrative and attention and atmospheres we might design here. Being constantly against the structures of it, what stories we might share, what it might take for us to survive. The noise serves none. They were hovering, cutting the air, cruciform in being, sacrificial in form. May I declare what I've lost. As the internet changes, I feel that art born of the browser should also evolve to our new sensibilities. I want to blur these lines, make work that can't be ignored, that requires an intensity, and in a way, do this to make people hyper aware of the conditions that they're under online, what is designed around them. In my work, I labor to be manual, durational, and intense, especially as everything becomes more passive, automated, and invisible. One way I've been describing my work is internet ambience, inspired by what sound does. Think about it in terms of the performance, of the general structure of all these browser windows and sites. Thinking about the environmental conditions I'm trying to expose. Can our relationships with computers be more poetic, expressive, and intimate? Is what I often ask. I want to be intimate with the web, to find the pockets of goodness in it, to find it enchanting again. Not because we don't know what's around us, but because we're hyper aware of everything. Websites, given the structure of the URL, of the link that you just type and click and enter, are a medium generally organized for access and retrieval. The internet is a space, sure, but you're teleporting to other spaces rather than really treading through these days. Rather than cover to cover reading, you're jumping around. Against an internet where you're always at the edge of attention, simply passively absorbing rather than consciously processing, I'd like to overtake you. Maybe I'm also interested in making websites that can also function as landscapes, canvases, reference materials, encyclopedia. Only a delayed surrender if I really need it. Language evaporating upward, sleepwalking, smoke from dusk, inheriting form, the mythicence, how nonsense becomes scripture, gods eating the credit, the ruins feeling progress. Let me go gently to the night. This work is a series of dreams, I guess, browser experiences that take a few minutes to run, taking over your computer for a while. Give your screen and surrender it. I've been presenting pieces like this in videos and using them in performances. Really experimenting with the level of interactivity, I guess, that I'm demanding of people for the work to be read. This one is more atmospheric. I'll share some work that I've been releasing over the past few months, or yeah, since the start of the year. How to make a life. There's nothing I'm doing. All I say is pointless. Listen to no declaration. Next year I will really, from retirement I'll have the money. This is a recent series of hypertext that I've been making. I feel like most of this work I make kind of rapidly in fronties over a few days, so I decided to write and make in this form. It's very visual and spatial, to just talk about personal thoughts and experiences and references that I've been accumulating. Maybe I over-index. and the beauty of the form. Maybe I linger too long. This year I will read no novels, and I will make no inquiries. We will ask what was real or computed. In this year, I will need nothing at all. In this year, I'm nothing at all. In this century, I will become nothing at all. What I want is for the bounds of my work to become unstable. First, for it to go beyond a single tab. For it to be connected to every other thing I've made. For everything I do to feel like it's come from something. I think all my sites draw from both this encyclopedic and archival impulse I kind of have. Encyclopedic and me aspiring for some form of totality. If I make enough, will I make sense of myself? Or of some stories? Maybe the work in hypertext is so fragmented because I want to allow time for it to be arranged into something infinite and beyond me. I want to eventually make things that are so emergent, whose mass is enough to exceed me. And maybe they're archival in the sense that I've always seen sites as a way to preserve some self or moment. She draws a border between language and name. I declare, I go, I revel, distinguishing between a boundary and a wall. My poor memory failed me. I understand. I see. I'm a hero, a reader. My poor memory made me a prophet. To elevate my stories or words against a medium that seeks to erase me. In her declaration, there was distance. In the web, or on the web, everything is present, everything's precarious. Endlessness often gives the illusion of permanence. Found the love of her life again. I tried. I watching the world, I disbelieve. Not sure if I'm ready to see it. An hour for the regret. I admire less so the permanent record. I aspire for the more plural one. Websites allow me to take many lives and names, to be traced, experienced, and remembered in many contradictory ways. But for the first time, a girl was tamed for 1,000 years. I want to complicate my legibility and others' interpretation of me, reject coherence. I think this type of distributed, fragmented attention also matches how people operate today. We spoke in tongues, left the details out. Impartial, partial, and patient. I want work that rewards those who pay attention most. We compromise for the sun, we sow the ferns, we wake the fields, we listen to the decree. How to make space. This is another work I've done recently. Again, I'm speaking about how most of my net art aspires to make places or sites that might be inhabited. I hope to make systems that invite life. This work is called Archipelago, designed to be a more passive showcase of scenes of domestic life, inspired by Filipino social realist painters like Amisola. often directly riffing off the paintings. This work in video form is currently on view at Wahed in New York, on view until March 19. In assembling this piece and lots of my other work, I like to take imagery from stock sites, Facebook Marketplace, Street View, and try to take these impersonal images or images often from surveillance material, and try to personalize them again. There are these 15 hand-coded sequences in the work, but something that I've really enjoyed is that aside from these scenes that run themselves, I've made kind of like a little city builder here. Just assemble these random objects and people, creating these simple scenes of rural life, often depicting the domestic after disaster, provincial dreams and dramas. Thinking about city builders, I always have this fantasy of constructing space, not necessarily to make something grand, but to just make the simple life that I feel is now out of reach for me. How to sing a song. Other forms that my work takes are these also browser-based performance lectures, often overtaking people's phones or launching my hypertext work in the middle. At Transmediale a few weeks ago, I premiered this piece called Every Love Song in the World, which is this kind of karaoke mega mix about the intimacies of infrastructures. It's kind of just like the recurring theme underneath all my work. It's this multi-chapter lecture performance that traces how Filipinos mediate and condition networks as we know it, from cable ship workers who lay out cable infrastructure, the Filipinos on the USAT Burnside, the first American cable ship in the Pacific, who worked in the Philippines and then in American military bases for a decade, starting around 1900 after the American and Spanish War in the Philippines, to tracing figures like the Queen of Canada, Romana Didelot, a Canadian Filipino migrant connected to QAnon, to, there's shots here of Faker, the League of Legends gamer, who is presented as this kind of geopolitical force, a projection of a fantasy we hold over the serious politics of play, what esports domination can do to give a nation morale. Alex Keisha, another Filipina theorist I love, commented that this was a theory of everything, which I think is pretty accurate. It was really an attempt to weave my work together, trying to make sense of this internal contradiction. How is my identity enriched or complicated? How can I be proximate and intimate with infrastructures designed to inhibit us? Despite all of these systems invisibilizing the Filipino, how do I find myself amidst it all? Some others. I imagine myself in the skyscrapers of Makati, Philippines, housing workers, their intelligence powering the technological systems we have today. I've come to understand the world as something assembled, distributed, and composed. This is not unique to me as a tech worker. This is just the Filipino experience in an economy that is largely powered by business process outsourcing, virtual assistants. The Philippines is the perfect subject for this technological work. We speak English perfectly. We are trained on imitation. We are a colonial project. Most of my work is informed by this tension I feel as a full-time tech worker. I grew up in conditions where the infrastructural is explicit. Being Filipino, I feel this careful tension around the tools I employ, what I speak of. and how my country's economy is built off our invisible labor that power the technologies we have today. I understood the crevices of an image, the bends of the river and the machine. Maybe this is why the nature of my work attempts to be so loud that it cannot be ignored. Pushing at the bounds of what is seen, can I ever turn personal systems or turn extractive systems into personal ones? This was another performance project I had done, Amisola, which means miracle in Tagalog. It was my attempt to translate the 20 mysteries of the rosary into knit artworks, reframed from Mary's perspective. The rosary as a prayer based on scripture, making use of prayer beads, a very systematic computational artifact, a tool of Marian devotion. In this prayer, you're asking for this maternal figure's intercession, praying for her to pray for you. Faith is a continuous theme in the work. Much of my trust in technological systems comes from watching how my own history and belief was established. This was presented as a 6-hour performance, drawn from how I've prayed many of the rosary like daily, several times a day for over a decade of my life. Examining kind of the femininity of computation, the nature of containment, how often technology encourages its containers and intermediaries to disappear, or religion often encourages this. A tracing of Filipino Catholicism, truth and image making, divinity and delusion. Ever since I was young, I've been interested in the complications of Catholicism. I was raised under Mary is a controversial figure, of course, but I like the confusion over the Bible's authorship and interpretation. I like to read it cover to cover. I was so invested in citational methods and structures, in the ways we'd gathered to interpret it, how it was translated, and how it made us. This chart made by Chris Harrison visualizes about 64,000 cross-references or hyperlinks in the Bible, the conceptual links established in its margins and footnotes. I enjoy how, when I read a Bible, often the space occupied by its footnotes exceeds the actual space occupied by the text in its verses. Maybe this is why my work aspires to be so extreme in form. A few more that I got on the computer. A project I did over the past few years was this exhibition on Filipino internet art called Computer Mayan, which is Filipino for that's what you get for using the computer. For kind of like new media art in the Philippines, commissioning work every year or so. It's stylized as this kind of like karaoke machine, presented as that, or in a PisoNet, which is kind of like an arcade machine with a computer. You put in a few coins and get a few minutes of internet and machine access. So it's even more low cost and time constraint than computer cafes. Many of the 24 pieces on the website were these artists' first time directly working with a browser. And I hope all these games, stories, and software that they've assembled serve as kind of like counter-narratives, a record against whatever new media canon is supposed to exist, acknowledging how we are already existing and producing at the margins of the web. And this is organized under the project Develop that Ray mentioned earlier, which I've been running since 2016. It started off very technological and is now kind of working between technology and the arts. Speak a bit about all this explicitly Filipino work. I like what the Filipino writer Nick Joaquin says about how Filipino identity is provoked by our country's experience of war and colonialism. Always An identity is formed and affirmed by technical and cultural revolutions after Spanish and American colonialism. Our identity and struggles persist beyond an internet that seeks to extract and divide us. Philippine becoming has always existed beyond, in spite of these colonial bounds. And how we might be, and how we might love, and how we might inhabit the internet might be the same. Maybe the internet intensifies Filipino self consciousness, making us aware of what we're already inhabiting. There's little identity unspoiled by these conditions, always about producing consciousness and identity within the instruments of the colonial, asserting identity with it. A bunch of my other projects basically push at the structures of the browser, emerging from a desire to explore the boundaries of what is around me, to tell stories within them, to simulate an approximate world from cityscapes made out of iframes that I hosted on other people's sites with people moving around them, to collages made out of YouTube embeds, to short films made entirely out of iframes and found images. Last year, I purchased a domain, yet another one, to tell a story about myself. Everything I.love. That's where more of my work can be found. And I think I'll keep making on the internet until there's enough mass for me to go beyond me. I hope all these experiences, text, images, hypertext, accrete. I hope to be so full and everywhere that I cannot help but be found. Yeah, um, that's all I have to share, I think.
Thank you so much, Chia. That was fantastic. Um, I have a wall of Post-its, but there's also so much. There's like some amazing questions in the chat. Um, Bree, do you mind if I MC some of this? So I would say like looking at the chat, it looks like there's like kind of like two camps. There's the kind of the conceptual and the practical, like how do you make it, and then like sort of like some other kind of thoughts. I'm gonna choose from that group someone to represent. Aurea, are you able to go on? You want to ask your question?
have
Okay.
I have like a million questions.
You had a million questions. Aurea,
No, I
are you
guess
an
I was
amazing
curious
artist that
about what did I ask first? If you want people to interact, like I guess both questions I have are sort of intertwined. Like you want people to interact, is there a primacy of the actual internet like experience, or is it just for your, I mean, how you think about it? Is it really for your own like diaristic and performative purposes? And then like there's the translation of the interaction into video to make it sort of more easy, I guess, for people. Does it bother you that people don't interact, I guess, is the question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think first and foremost, the the internet feels like the most natural form for me to produce these like in process. Rather like code is the form I like to do this. I mean, it can be linear, it can be generative. I often employ a mix of both. And the form of the site, um, what inputs you can manipulate, just allow for so much more. Um, I think like randomness or variables that I can play with, and just they're more interesting parameters for me to work with. And I've come to write always in these like fragmented forms, never in a kind of like linear, like straightforward way. I mean, I write essays when I must, but then it comes so much more naturally for me to develop ideas in these like nodal, like rhizomatic ways. Um, both presenting the work as performance and websites, where the performance is always kind of random. I think there's another question on that. Is always kind of like um, an element of improvisation. I don't know what I'm reading. I mean, the work is like sometimes linear, like we are only moving to each other that I read earlier. When you click through it, there's like generally like ordered sequences, but then I was popping up different windows at a time and leaving some in the desktop that I was returning to as I had other work open. That's like really the quality of the work I like. And that's kind of why the style of the presentation is done in that way. There's so many work that I leave, there's some I return to. I think that's how we browse in general. It's not like unexpected. That's just how reading on the internet is structured. Um, I feel like that's the type of attention that I'm like normally working with and is actually more natural than we think. I mean, everyone is always splitting their attention. Even you on this Zoom are probably like looking at whatever else is going on your computer screen, and on your phone, etc. So I think that's just like the natural way of like working with people's attention. Um, the recent video works um, are pretty new for me. I haven't like organized a lot of my work into video. I mean, I guess like a recorded performance ends up being flattened into that form, but for video, like the Archipelago piece, or for dreaming, which I've usually presented in video form. Um, yeah, it's a bit of a shame that a video is just like an MP4 that I hand over. I would love for, but I do feel like it's important in terms of how do I get the work out to someone. Video tends to be more accessible, even though a website is also very accessible. Maybe the answer is just I want millions of videos. But there's so much I get also from videos. Like there's a whole thing I could talk about over how I love to consume things online over like co-streams or let's plays rather than playing the game itself and seeing this layer of commentary or even just like the altered cropping or flipping of a video also is interesting and generates new things. The lossiness with video is also interesting to me, but right now it does feel a bit inhibiting. I would love to figure out how video can be made more generative. I mean, I know there's like the generative film thing,
Mhm.
but I'd love to see more on it.
Well,
All right.
thanks for answering. It's great to talk to you in real time. Ciao.
Thanks, Aria.
Of course, same to
Uh,
you.
Sound, you're back and you had a great question. Do you want to ask it?
Yes, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, well, one, I wanted to say thank you for acknowledging the global apartheid in your work regarding the Philippines and tech and the service-oriented nature that's often attributed to Filipinos, which in the comment that I made, I think that's attributed to the Kapwa culture, the Kapwa philosophy and psychology that's beautiful and inherent within the more pagan pre-colonial Philippines, but was as a part of colonization was extracted. So thank you so much for that mention and the representation of people and the roles that they play in the system. My question was more about the technical aspects. Um, I was wondering if some of the pink browser windows that we saw were actually div layers. Um, and I was also, and if it's not div layers, like what are you using to program the browser to move in such flow? And then, because I think someone else mentioned how the screens moved in a cartography kind of like way. And then the other question is about music, whether or not you're also uh, playing music on equipment on the other end as you're narrating.
Yeah, thanks for the comment on different religion, colonialism. It's definitely like so important to the content and conceptual themes behind a lot of the work. And on the technical aspects, um, there's a mix of things that I had done in this showing. I will briefly screen share, but maybe some of the maybe what you're alluding to is some of these movements. I don't know if this is actually being screen shared, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
employ. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so there's this kind of like map tile view of the browsers.
Mhm.
Um, I think in other performances I further complicated. There's like alternate views for these, and I like to have fun with like the shortcuts that arrange or organize or structure the windows. A bunch of these are, I mean, most of these that you see are browser windows, but then I'm probably like making it more confusing for people who are viewing on Zoom or on YouTube by using videos of screen recording. So it looks like there's windows within windows, but then yeah, they're they're fake. And then some other pieces that I've done also have started using just like elements on the screen that don't have the browser kind of like interface on it. Like if you use Electron, which I used a lot for Archipelago, then like you can just have like a what appears to be a moving image without the usual address bar, etc. So
Oh,
um yeah, just making use of like a bunch of different annoying, costly tech frameworks has been fun.
oh, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and for the sound, I have a website that is just playing like a bunch of samples looped.
Hmm.
I my sound is just yeah, just looping sounds from Splice or things I find on the internet or field recordings.
Oh,
Right
that's
now,
beautiful. It's
yeah.
really gorgeous music, and your voice is amazing.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. I'm using this MIDI fighter instrument. I don't know, it's being blurred, but it's basically like 16 knobs. So it's just
Hmm.
turning the volume up and down of different loops. But in performances, I use a bunch of synthesizers. My relationship to the music is like that of a tech worker who likes to buy cool gear. I like field recording also,
Yeah.
as a
Do
hobby, and I
you
try
do
to
you
use
record your own?
um uh, I don't record a lot of like the more melodic sounds. I do use
Okay.
some field recordings in work, but too much time coding. I need to spend more time on
Mhm.
Ableton, I guess.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Joa had a great question. Joa, you want to ask? Oh, you're still muted. You're still muted. Yes, that's you.
Oh, hi.
Did I pronounce your name?
Josh mentioned that you have a commercial work. And I wanted to know if your relationship with HTML and the website and the poetics of it came from having to work with it, or is it something that unfolded from it? Because I'm Brazilian as well, and I always felt like there was I work with technology, and being from the global south, there's always like a relationship with hardware and software that everything is really expensive constantly. So you end up working with really simple tools, and sometimes it unfolds into something new, and it's fascinating, but at the same time frustrating. So I wanted to how you deal with that.
Yeah. I spoke a bit about my background at the beginning. I was coding at a very young age, and I had like I was just like using my parents' laptop or like the family computer. And in a way, it was the most accessible medium for me then. I mean, I know internet access is like prohibitive, but we did have it at home. And that was just like way more viable for me than even having like art materials or doing any art lessons. So that was my art form, just like drawing on MS Paint with like this spray can tool or whatever, and then evolving from there. So yeah, the internet was like all I had. Obviously the computer now I use is a bit more decked out, but then back then, just playing games on like 2 FPS and then making websites for that game. So probably spent more time making the websites than playing the actual thing I was making about as a result. Um, so I've been making for yeah longer than I've been like practicing like commercially or working in tech. I did have a period where um, I mean, in high school, I thought that technology was all I wanted to do. I thought I would study computer science and become an engineer and like found a company or something. That's what develop initially was. We were like doing like startup stuff for like 16-year-olds in the Philippines in like 2016, which is like kind of crazy and evil. And it's evolved since then. And then I got a scholarship to study in the US, and then my life kind of like changed. I didn't know that this would be the path for me. And then I got my first job out of college and moved to San Francisco, and was working in proximity to Silicon Valley. So I've always been, like at odds of like that practice and what I do personally. Like all this time I've been making personal websites, but now I'm like practicing commercially. I mean, it's so important for artists and people like me to be within these companies, to like understand them, to work within these confines. Um, I'm not doing it perfectly, and obviously I can't like re reroute or like change everyone's conditions from the inside. But I think it is important to be embedded in these ways, and it gives me like interesting perspectives. You know, I alluded to it a bit earlier, but as things go, as AI becomes more, important, or as things get more automated and perform at, I mean, I'm pressured to do it at my job. I do design things that help people kind of like automate away work, which means, automating away the labor that a lot of my country is like built on. It's important to think about, like what's next. It's important for me to also like privilege these slower handmade forms of work. Like a lot of the websites you see, I'm like hand making them. I'm handwriting the text in the code editor. Um, I mean, slowness as like resistance is a very like naive thing to say. It's partially true, I feel. I think it just like makes the work more distinct or like interesting. But I mean, there's so many, yeah, there's so much there about my work identity and what I produce as an artist. Um,
I love it. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Anastasia, you had a great question.
Oh, hi. It's actually Manlin, but I am using my friend
Oh,
Anastasia's
I'm sorry,
laptop.
Madeline. Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
That was in
no.
the chat. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's okay. It's my fault. Yeah, I had sort of like two questions, and both are sort of like intimate questions. So the first question is around like faith and spirituality. I know you had a section on that, but I was wondering how faith and spirituality fit into the blurring of the roles of like human machine, the digital infrastructure you mentioned. And the second question was like I think you said intimacy with technology and the internet several times, and that's kind of like the main theme in your practice, but just was really curious what intimacy with the internet like means to you, and how do you know you like feel that intimacy?
yeah, thank you for the two great questions. I mean, faith is to me like just it can be considered like a form of technology, and so much of like my practice of faith and my early complications with it mirror like my complications with technology now. I think what spirituality and religion brings for me, right, is just what belief means and how you might have to hold belief in something unverifiable, unarchivable, things that exist only in experience that are beyond the body. Like those are really important. And I think the work I did around Himala deals a lot with it, and how there's often like a feminine component to a lot of like religious practice that means a lot to me, and also to a lot of computation. Um, Aria, who's also who asked us earlier and also gave like who's also Catholic and gave like a beautiful interview about like spirituality and technology. Also comes to mind where she spoke about, like embodiment, how faith kind of lets you believe in avatars and believing in like multiple bodies and physical and digital lines forever being blurred. And I feel like that's so important to a lot of my work. And all of that is like further complicated because of how Catholicism was it's kind of like Filipino animism repackaged from like Spanish colonial like influence. And there's the dimension of Filipino labor and infrastructure that is invisibilized there. And then for intimacy, um, I think that it's it's a bit hard for me to talk about. I mean, it's just like what it is. I feel like just making work about love and earnestness is feels very naive. Obviously, I'm like young and that's all I write about, but then that's all I have. And maybe so much of it is about like all my life. I was like born and raised around like the internet, and it's where I first experienced love. It's where I first, kind of like got consciousness about my political situation, about what is possible. I upheaved my life from the Philippines to here because I was reading Reddit threads. Like there's so much about what I was innate, but about what being close to technology affords me, like a type of awareness and articulation of another, etc. Now I'm like trying to work beyond those bounds, and I think it's only possible when you are intimate with the machine, its structures.
Thank you so much.
All right, fantastic. Chia, I think we're at time. This is really brilliant. I love it. Bree, any words from Rhizome before we pass it off to Chia for sort of a final? I would love to know how people could keep in touch with you, support you, follow your work, all those things. But Bree, any thoughts from anything from Rhizome?
Just thank you so much for coming. This was wonderful, and thank you for co-hosting with me, Josh. Incredible as always, Chia.
So Chia, how can we follow you, support you? Um, how should we operate in the world? That would be, you know, take it away.
Yeah, my website is everythingi.love, and I'm on Instagram as hot emojia, unfortunately, and I'm on Twitter as non-performant. So feel free to follow me there, talk to me. Thank you for attending, everyone, and thank you for having me, Josh and Bree.
Absolutely. Chia, Bree, thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much for this. Thank you for everyone for joining us. We'll be doing this again next week. We'll also be doing future spaces, which is very similar to this. If I know some of you guys are coming from over there. Yeah, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Again, Chia, Bree, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.